So Christian and I, he's my son, he's going to be 21 this year. He and I were going through memory lane, just walking down memory lane a couple of weeks ago. And it threw me back to our hometown and this particular Walmart. I don't know how it is here or where you're from, but back home we had a Walmart. And as soon as you walked in to the left, it wasn't customer service, no restrooms. It was a Subway. Anything? Yeah, okay. So this Subway was great because every Sunday night after church, Christian and I would have boys' night. He was just a little old fellow when we started this. So every Sunday night, we would go to Walmart. And at the time, he was into these monster trucks, Monster Jam that comes to like Rupp Arena and these places. Went there a few times, but he loved to collect them. We tallied them up one day, and I'd spent a ridiculous amount of money on them. They're like $2.97 a pop, and he had about 300 of them. I'm like, man, wish I had that money back. But anyway, great memories, all right? So we would go in, we'd buy a sub, and Christian was just a little fellow, but for some reason, a 6-inch just wouldn't do it. The dude wanted a 12-inch, a foot long, and I'm like, you know what? That's my boy. It's a man right there, 6 inches, nothing. We need the whole thing. So we would both get foot-long subs, put them in the buggy, then we'd go back to the toy aisle and look for monster trucks. Well, it shifted a little bit. We were talking about this a couple of weeks ago. He and his friends got into marbles. So they're actually collecting marbles. Anybody collect marbles when you were smaller? Well, they sold those at Walmart too, and they were also $2.97 a pop. So we shifted from monster trucks to marbles, and we'd go back to this aisle. We'd get a bag of marbles. They were in this mesh little bag, just this sack of marbles. So we'd get one of those and come home, and he was collecting them. He had quite a big tub full of them. But he looked for different shapes, different sizes, and then also he looked for these colors threaded through them. And I remember we went to Walmart one day, and we get our subs, we go back to the aisle, and they're out. So there's a sales associate there, and I'm like, hey, do you have any more marbles? And she's like, I think there's some on the truck. We get a delivery every week. There should be some. So we wait, and we go back the next Sunday night. No marbles. We go back the next Sunday night, no marbles. And I kid you not, for about 6 to 7 weeks, we go back, no marbles. But in pursuit, we go back again and again and again and again. So we're in I heard that, Gary. So we're in week 2 of our series, Discipled. And what we're doing is we're walking through the book of James, but in a really interesting way. We're taking the first chapter of James, and we're looking at 5 principles or ideas that James just tosses our way. And if you'll remember from last week, James' goal is to call every single one of us to the metaphorical whiteboard up in front of the room so that we can solve a very personal problem. So when he does so, he wants to ask us 2 questions. And the first one is, who? Who is God calling me to be? Not in the future, but right now. I would dare say, even in a setting like this, even in this moment, who is God calling me to be? And the second question is, what is God calling me to do? Now, some of us, we know there's something good we should be doing. And just through the factors of life, what's literally going on when you leave here, it's going to reduce the chances that you're going to follow through. But you know it's the good thing you should be doing, but you're not. So James is calling us to task on those 2 questions. Now, there's a couple of things that challenge that, and that's why James is so important. This is probably the most practical book in your entire Bible. There's not a lot of theology. There's not a lot of history with the ancient Israelites. There's not a lot of in-depth teaching about Christ. It's about the practicality of your faith and my faith, how this plays out regardless of what's happening in our lives or what's going on around us. So the second thing we're doing is we're looking at these 5 ideas, and then we'll use James chapter 2 through 5 as supplemental text as we go on through this series. Now, here's what we're going to do this morning. Last week, we talked a little bit about perseverance, persevering especially through trials. And when you read the word trial in your New Testament, especially James, you're going to read it with another word as well. It's called temptation. And we read those words, and they're different. And there's nuances to them, but let me tell you this, if you're really interested in this stuff. When James wrote his letter, he uses one word. In the first century, when James would write this very particular Greek word, there were 2 meanings to it. So the idea of temptation and trial, they're very closely related. And sometimes it's simply the context of what's happening in our lives that helps us understand whether this is a temptation I'm facing or whether this is a trial that I'm facing. And we'll get into the logistics of temptation next week. But suffice it now to say they're closely related, but there are nuances that help us understand how to sharpen our focus when something is happening in our lives. So here's the nuances. Temptation. Temptation is usually internal. Like you feel it, but you also think about it. There's a lure in you that's leading you somewhere, and often somewhere you know you shouldn't go. Well, a trial is often external. There's pressure happening from an outside force on you, causing tension. Also, a temptation, it's usually the thought pattern of something is happening in me. Again, something is leading me somewhere that I shouldn't go, to somewhere I don't belong. Well, the trial is something is happening to me. Now, to show you how closely they are related, I was at a coffee shop not too long ago. I like to back in. Where are my guys at? You back into spots? Yes, you back into spots. No, not around here? Okay, all right, yeah, you back into spots, right? So I'm going to back in. I notice this is going to be a tight fit, and I back in. I get it anyway because that's what we do, right? We make things happen. So I back in. I'm going to get out of the door. And when I get out, I'm really close. But I know in my rearview mirror, I'm looking, and I'm right in the lines. Like, I have killed it. I've crushed this backing in spot. I'm as perfectly centered as you could be. So I'm getting out. Why is this car? And I get out and I step and I see the white line. You know, they're like 6 inches over here in my way. So this trial is like, why in the world is this happening? Why would this person do this? So there's an effect on me. A trial is something happening. But now I'm tempted. You know, do I open my door forcefully and hit their car and then just go on about my business? Like, what do you do? So you see they're related, but the trial is usually something is happening to me, or at least that's how we perceive it. That's the feeling. And then also, temptation is usually, I know what to do. I shouldn't do this, or I should do that, but I'm tempted to go against that. But I really know what I should do. I've got this great opportunity over here, and I really want to take advantage of it. But if I do, I run the risk of losing maybe my reputation, or my family, or my career. But I want it. But I know what I should do. I should walk the other way. Now, a trial is, I don't know what to do. There's something happening on the outside. I've not been in a situation like this before. Why is this happening? Why did they do that? I don't know what to do. And this is why James later on would call a trial a test. Once you have stood the test, once you have persevered under trial. Now, a trial is like a test, like the ACT. You know, you take the ACT or final exam, there's a designated ending to it. There's been a time allotted for this test, but the difference between a trial, biblically speaking, and then an ACT or a final exam is that the allotted time, we're fully aware of it. With a trial, we don't know how long this is going to last. And that is why we persevere. That's why James says you persevere when you're facing trials of various kinds. You keep moving forward. You're under it, and it's okay. There's an allotted time, a designated time. God's aware. You persevere. He helps you grow and develop. So how do we show our work? If James calls us to the board to show our work and how we put our faith into practice in solving these personal problems that we would call trials, how do you do that? One of the things you can do is you can simply ask. You can ask. So here's the Walmart, actually. And I love this picture. Here's the Walmart because you can see the subway, right? Can you see that good? And then what else do you see in this picture? Oh, just warm my heart. What do you see in this picture? You see those mountains? You see that snow? Yes, I love the snow. Where are my snow people? Yes, it's coming. So summer lovers, sorry, we hung tight with you, but now it's the fall. And I love dead stuff too. Just like when the leaves fall off of the trees, I love that. So beautiful picture. But that's the Walmart we would go to. So this Walmart, we would go again and again and again. I didn't know you all love dead stuff too. That's great. So we'd go repeatedly to this aisle and couldn't find it. So a couple of things. So James writes in James 1:5, he says, if any of you lacks, and then he specifies, if any of you lacks wisdom. And the assumption there is simply this, If you're persevering, if you're going through a trial, the assumption is this: you don't know what to do. So you need a shot of wisdom. So James says, if you're lacking wisdom because you're finding yourself in a place and you just don't know what to do, ask God. Now, when James writes, there's a couple of things about this super important. When James writes that word ask, he writes it in a way that we lose in English translation. And he writes it in a way so that it demonstrates repeated action. It's not like you ask God for wisdom and you hear nothing, so you close that door. That's no longer an option. It's not like you ask God for wisdom and he actually gives it to you, so you never go back. It's more like you ask God for wisdom and he provides. He gives you exactly what you need and you move forward. And then when you need that wisdom again, you go back to him repeatedly, again and again and again and again. You're asking God, and that's how you get through this trial. Second thing about it is, notice how specific it is, though. Notice how specific this request is. So how many of you use ChatGPT? All right, handful of you, right? So you'll know, and you can help educate the rest of us, you'll know that when you're using ChatGPT, the more specific the prompt, the better output you're going to get, the better response you will receive. So as you learn to work with ChatGPT and you learn to become very specific in what you're asking, then the source knows to give you a very specific reply. That's similar to what James is saying. If you need wisdom, that's what you need to ask for. And the more specific over time, coming back to God again and again, the more specific than you could be with your Father, the better response he's going to be able to give you. Now, there's a little bit of a roadblock because some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. Some of us are bringing some extremely heavy baggage to our trials. So we're not so much interested in wisdom as we are relief. So when we come to God and we're like, give me wisdom, but he doesn't give us what we're looking for, what we're asking for, what we're hoping for, we can tune him out. In my experience, and if you're anything like David Green, you can go to God in prayer, you can ask him for wisdom, and he will give it to you on a silver platter. It's so clear. And if you're anything like me, you're like, no, I didn't think I ordered that. That's going to be too risky, too complicated, too difficult, not interested. That's going to put me in a weird position. That's going to ask something from me that I'm not ready to give. So I reject it. And we get in the habit of this. I mean, how many of you have used a product knowing full well that it says in the bottom corner, this product is known to the state of California to have chemicals that cause cancer, right? And you just go on and you use it. We reject warnings. We reject wisdom, right? So listen to this. When James is writing, remember, James comes from a strong Jewish background. So he would be fully aware of this text. This comes from Proverbs, and this was an extremely important book for the Jewish community, especially James, and as he's helping us sort through the idea of wisdom. But listen to this. This comes from Proverbs chapter 1. And the neat thing about it is that wisdom takes on like a personality. So in this text that I'm going to read to you, it's about wisdom, but it's also wisdom speaking. So this is wisdom speaking to us, and listen to what she says. So wisdom shouts from the streets. She calls to the crowds. She calls to those who are gathered, and listen to what she says. Come and listen to my counsel, and I will share my heart with you, and I will make you wise. And then when you read through chapter 1 of Proverbs, you see that there's this contemplation with wisdom. You don't have to rush and keep reading these verses. You can slow down and actually listen to what wisdom is saying. So the text slows us down, like wisdom is thinking about what she wants to say to us next, and then listen to what she says. And it's kind of harsh. She says, I called you. I called you so often, but you wouldn't come. I reached out to you, you paid no attention, you ignored my advice, and you rejected the correction I offered. So I will laugh when you are in trouble. Have you ever been there? You just don't know what to do, and you've asked, and now you're in a situation that's compounded. But if you're extremely honest with yourself and you reflect, you'll know that some time ago, a couple of days ago, a couple of weeks ago, you did know exactly what you should do. The prayer for wisdom had been answered. You had a shot of insight. You understood the direction, and you chose not to go. I will laugh when you're in trouble because you're looking for relief, not wisdom. The text goes on and says, but all, which would include you and you and you and you and me, all who listen to me will live in peace, untroubled by fear or harm. For some time, one of my prayer practices has simply been to get alone, just to be alone for a little bit. Usually I try to get on my knees, if at all possible, just to show honor and respect to this amazing God we serve. And one of my frequent prayers is simply this: God, you know I need wisdom for this. And I'm struggling because this is happening to me, and I'm not sure what to do. So one of my prayers is simply this: what am I missing? God, help me understand, what is it about this context, this situation? What am I missing? Now, to help us answer that question and move forward in James, Meredith is going to come up again, and she's going to walk us through a better perception of how we kind of sort this out and figure from a mathematical perspective how we move forward with trials.
Good morning, everybody. Okay, we're going to change things up a little bit, and I promise this is a safe space. We talked about making sure that we were in a safe and comfortable environment for us to persevere. I'd like for every person to close their eyes for just a second. When everyone has closed their eyes, I'm going to show a picture up on the screen, and as soon as you open your eyes, I want you to shout out the first thing that you see. Go ahead and open them. Okay, I heard a lot of different answers. Okay, raise your hand if you saw the duck first or the bird. Okay, about half. Good. Okay, raise your hand if you saw the rabbit or the bunny. There we go. We got about the other half. Most important thing, did I alter the picture in any way whatsoever? No. But your perspective, though, determined how you perceived this image, didn't it? Okay, close your eyes. We're going to do it again one more time. All right, open. Okay, I heard a couple of different answers. I heard 5/10, and that is correct as a fraction. I heard something else, heard somewhere over in here. What was another answer? A half. Very good. Okay. Any other perceptions that we can see? Joe. There we go. I knew I was going to get a sports reference here somewhere. Good. Okay. Yes. Okay. Anybody else? Anybody else? Does anyone else perceive this maybe as a decimal? That this is 0 and 5/10 written as a decimal? What about a percentage? Could this be seen as 50%? Could this also be seen as a ratio of 5 objects to 10 objects? Does anyone see this as a sum? That this is 1/10 being added 5 times, repeatedly. And if we can see this as addition, repeated addition, we could also see this as a product, that this is 5 groups of 1/10 being added. And if you can see it as a sum and as a product, you can also see it as a quotient. That fraction bar, also called the vinculum, if you guys needed a random factoid, that's for trivia night or Jeopardy, the fraction bar is called the vinculum. Remember that, because it may come in handy one day. But you can see that is 5 being divided by 10. So you can see that this one image, did I alter it in any way whatsoever? But how many different perceptions and concepts did we just talk about based off of just one particular image? Okay? So the most important thing, let's go on to the next picture. Our perspective. Who's correct in this situation here? Both of them are. Because our perspective in that moment is going to determine how we are perceiving something. So in the way that I teach math, I fall under this methodology that's called perceptual learning. And really when it boils down to it is that our percepts, how we see and how we hear, forms ideas. And these images that I wanted to show you all today really hits on one of the most important perceptual imperatives that I teach, and it's called equivalence. When something looks different, but its value is really the same. So we talked about that image with the bird or the duck versus the bunny. Two different ways of looking at it, both are correct. Depends on your perspective. Then we talked about the fraction. Then these two fellows right here, that's what they're arguing over, which perspective is correct. They both are. So whenever we start to talk about trials and temptation, we need to think about what we talked about last week. And so if you did not join us last week, that's what we're going to review a little bit. When we look at the book of James versus a trial and a temptation, the outcome is really going to be different whether we are in isolation or whether we're in a faith-based community. So if we go back and look at that equation from last week, there we go. So if you are in a trial for a long period of time, but you do that in isolation, the outcome is going to be bitterness. But what David has talked about today, what if we were to replace the word trial or use substitution with temptation? They look a little different, but they're really the same thing, whether it's going to be internal or external. And if you look in the book of James in chapter 4, he talks about boasting. That's why we can't look into the future, and that's really the example that he's trying to tell us, is that how can we boast if we say in the future, like if I'm thinking forward to next year, I'm going to be living in this city, doing this job or whatever. How can we boast about something in the future that we have no idea what trial or season that we're going to be in? And what he really wants to look at is that if we were to distill that boastfulness, it's going to come down to pride. We are really taking pride in saying that I can predict the future without having God anywhere in that equation. And that's something we've got to be very careful with, especially whenever we looked at the one from last week. It was isolation. When we were talking about being in isolation, we took God out of the equation thinking that we could get through this period by ourselves. And we saw that the outcome is going to be bitterness. So one of the things that I really want us to think about is that how are we acting within that period? In my classroom, that's what I had this poster. I wish I could give credit to the person who said this, but I've tried to look everywhere. But this poster was one of the most important posters that I had in my classroom for this very purpose. And it says that good mathematics is not about knowing all the answers, but it's how you behave when you don't know. So if I had a kid who was struggling with a question, did they push their paper off in the floor? Did they break their pencil or whatever? Or did they sit there, take a deep breath, try to persevere through that unknowing period of knowing that they were in a safe environment, that it was okay for them to struggle, that they had resources and friends and community that could reach out and help them. So that's one of the things that I want to leave you with today, is that if you are in the middle of a trial or a temptation, because remember, we can interchange those, how are we acting when we are in the period of the unknown? And that's what I want to leave you with today.
Did you catch that part about the most important thing is how you behave when you don't know? That's powerful. Joyce Toll was my third grade teacher, and I actually had the honor of being her pastor. And I owe a lot to her. About 2 months ago, I called her. She had given me a little correction my first year of ministry back home, my first full-time ministry. I had several teachers in that local church, and it was great just serving them in that capacity. But I called Mrs. Toll. It's hard for me to call her Joyce. I called Mrs. Toll and was like, hey, I just want to thank you for one specific correction you gave me, because it's altered the past 30 years of my life. It's just altered. I'm so thankful for what you have done with that. And we had a great conversation catching up, and afterward, I was thinking a little bit about her, and she had us do this test in third grade. I remember it so clearly. We had the desks that, it had like the square, and it had the insert there where you could put all your books, and the detached chair so you could scoot out like that. So she gave us all this test, and I think there were 20 questions on it. And she was like, okay, finish the test, and as soon as you're done, you can go to the back of the room, get a book, and just sit there, read. You got to be quiet, but sit there and read till everyone else is finished. But you have to complete the test. So we start going through the test, and it's a weird test. It's not like an exam or something. It has these questions like, okay, get up from your desk and go and walk around the room. So at any given moment, students are on different questions. So you could see students walking around the room. One of the questions was like, stand up on your chair. So you could see at any moment students walking around and some standing on their chair. And then one of the questions was something like, just shout out which question you're on and read the question. So at any given moment, there's kids walking around the room, some standing on their chair and some just screaming into the room. And then when you get finished, the very last question, it says, now go back and read the instructions. And then when you go back and you read the instructions, it says, simply put your name on the test and you're finished. What a clever way of getting someone's attention, right? So remember that though, like how do you do all that? So the thing about it is when you know what to do, when you know what's required of you, when you know specifically the step you need to do, that's what you focus on. None of this other stuff. So when you're in a trial, all of this other stuff, for some weird reason, probably because trial and temptation are so related, this feels like where I need to focus. But really, I need to focus on one thing. So James later on comes along and he says, and this is the second thing you do when you're navigating a trial and you're persevering. The first thing is ask God for wisdom. And then when wisdom comes, James writes this in 4:17. He says, when you know to do good, that wisdom has come and you've got a shot of insight and you know this is the good you should do, you need to do it. I would bet a lot, someone else's money, that right now, there's some of you, you know exactly what you need to be doing. It's just you're struggling, persevering, trying to hold your head up, trying to stay above water. You're in a trial. You just don't know why this is happening to me and I don't know what to do about it. But I bet you really do. There's some good you could put into practice. Even if it feels small, incidental, something you know you could be doing. Now notice what James says. If you know there's good you should do and you don't do it, it is what? Sin. We've talked a lot before. That word simply means you've missed it. So as you're moving forward and you're persevering and you've got this trial and this tension bearing on you, if you don't do the good you know you should do, you're literally missing it. Who's suffering because of that? So here's what I want to do. I want to make myself available to you, okay? I want to touch base with you. If this is resonating and making sense, then I'm the pastor here. And if you've been here for a while, I'm your pastor. If you're new here, let's touch base. Let's talk. I'd love to get to know you, love to meet you. But I'm going to be available in the back. And if you need someone to come alongside of you and pray because you just don't know how to ask, you're struggling with ChatGPT and you don't know how to get more specific with your request, let me pray with you. Or if you know the good you need to do, two things. Number one, I want to challenge you, especially if you've been around church for a while. If not, hang around and talk to me and I can help you out, okay? I'll be there with you. I'll listen. Maybe I can help you navigate or just be that voice that says, you're right. This is exactly what you should be doing. Sometimes you just need someone else to give you some kind of weird permission or encouragement to do it. I would love to say those words to you, or just love to listen to what's going on. Listen to what's happening, and maybe we can create an ongoing conversation. But the second thing is this, I challenge you. Been around church for a while. We're going to sing, we're going to worship, but you know what's going on next. You've been around here for a while, I challenge you. If the pressure's on and you know what you need to do and you should be doing it now, I challenge you to leave early. Leave now. Go and turn that into a reality. Put your faith into practice. Show your work. Do it now so the moment doesn't get lost. God, you're good. Even in trials, you are good. You're holy. You're God. And we acknowledge that. And for your presence in our lives that is so available to give us wisdom during some difficult seasons of life, we praise you for it and we thank you. And if any of us, we're more interested in relief right now than we are wisdom, so we're actually rejecting the ideas of what we should be doing, forgive us. And may this be a moment where your Holy Spirit taps us on the shoulder and says, yeah, he's talking to you. It's time for you to leave a little early today and make things right. So for all of us, Father, that know the good we should be doing, may we take that first step to do that right now. May it all be for your glory, as always, through your Son, Jesus. Amen.